Good Shabbos, everyone. Good evening. It's wonderful to have everyone here as we begin this Shabbat and we begin the Bar Mitzvah of Sidney Ryder. And to begin our service, we call upon some very proud women, including his mother, to come up to the bima and to help us light the candles and say the blessings as we begin this Shabbat. And we ask everyone to please rise, page 4. You may be seated. And we turn the page to page 5, and we continue with our service in the middle of the page. Shalom Aleichem, Malchei Hasharet.
Shalom Aleichem, Malchei Hasharet, Malchei Elyon. Yi Melech Malchei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Malchem L'Shalom, Malchei Hashalom, Malchei Elyon. Yi Melech Malchei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu Ni L'Shalom, Malchei Hashalom, Malchei Shalom, Malchei Hashalom, Malchei Elyon. Ni Melech Malchei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
And we continue now on page 11, Lechuna Radana, Ladonai.
Lechuna Radana, Lechuna Radana, Lechuna Radana, Ladonai. Lechuna Radana, Lechuna Radana, Lechuna Radana, Ladonai. Naria, Naria, Letzor Ishenu, Lekadma Fanav V'toda. Naria, Naria, Letzor Ishenu, Bizmirav Naria Lo. Lechuna Radana, Lechuna Radana, Lechuna Radana, Ladonai. Lechuna Radana, Lechuna Radana, Lechuna Radana, Ladonai.
We continue now, page 14, Yismachu Hashemayim, V'tagel Haaretz.
ישמחו השמיים, ישמחו השמיים, ישמחו השמיים ותגל הארץ, ישמחו השמיים, השמיים, ישמחו השמיים, השמיים, ישמחו השמיים ותגל הארץ.
Now we continue in our prayer book, page 23, Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala.
Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala, Pnei Shabbat Nekavela. Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala, Pnei Shabbat Nekavela. שמור וזכור בדיבור אחד, השמיענו אל המיוחד. אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ולתפארת, ולתהילה, ולתהילה. לך אדוני לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך אדוני לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. שבת לכו ונלכה כי מקור הברכה מראש מכרם נסוכה סוד מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך אדוני לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה. We rise and face the door. לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה. שלום מטרת בעלה גם בשיחה ובצולה תוך אמוני עם סגולה בואי חלה בואי חלה. לך אדוני לקראת כלה בני שבת נקבלה. לך
Please be seated.
We welcome now those who are mourning, and to those who are in mourning, we offer the words of comfort from our tradition, Hamakom Yerachem Etchem, B'tok Shar Avalei Tzion V'Yerushalayim. May God's presence bring you comfort amongst the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. For those who are mourning and those observing yard site, we'll now recite the mourner's Kaddish on page 30. Yit Gadal V'Yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah. B'yalma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uvizman kariv v'yemru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mivarach li'alam li'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudsha b'reichu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechemata, da'amiran v'yalma v'yemru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yemru amen. Osei shalom bimramav, hu ya'asei shalom, aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yemru amen. We now invite everyone to rise for Baruch, page 39.
Baruch et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed.
You may be seated, and we continue with Ahavat Olam, page 40.
אהבת עולם בית ישראל, בית ישראל, אהבת תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת, על כן אדוני אלוהינו, ושוכבנו נשיח בחוקיך, אהבת עולם בית ישראל, בית ישראל, עמך אהבת תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת, ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד, כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגי יומם ולילה. באהבתך באהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. Sydney leads us in the Shema, page 41.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, bechol levavcha, uvechol nafshecha, uvechol meodecha, ve'hayu hadvarim ha'eleh, asher anochi mitzavecha, hayom al levavecha, v'shinantam levanecha, v'dibarta bam, b'shivtecha b'veitecha, uv'lektecha b'derech, uv'shofecha uv'kumecha, ukshartam leot al yadecha, v'hayu letotafot bein einecha, uv'tavtam al mezuzot beitecha, uv'sharecha.
We continue silently on page 42 in Hebrew or English.
Adonai Elohechem Emet.
Who is like you, Adonai, among the mighty? Who is like you, adorned in holiness, revered in praise, working wonders? Micha Mocha, page 44.
Krishna
Shelter us in the shadow of your wings, for you, God, watch over and deliver us, and you, God, are sovereign, merciful, and compassionate. Hashkivenu, page 45.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, Hamidenu Malkeinu l'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, Hamidenu Malkeinu l'chaim. Ushmor tzeiteinu, uvoleinu, l'chaim u'shalom, me'ata ve'ad olam. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, Hamidenu Malkeinu l'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, Hamidenu
And now we continue in our service, Vishamru, V'nei Yisrael, page 46.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורתם
and the silent Amidah, page 47 through page 52.
On to page 51. Join in. Shalom Rav. Shalom Rav al Yisrael tasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael tasim leolam. Ki ata hu melech adon lechol hashalom. Ki ata Shalom Rav al Yisrael tasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael tasim leolam. B'tov b'necha levarech et amcha Yisrael b'chol עת ולכל שעה ישמרך. שלום רב על ישראל תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל תשים לעולם. ברוך אתה Put our arms around each other. Let's all join together. Aseh Shalom. Aseh Shalom. Aseh Shalom bimromah. Uyaseh Shalom aleinu. Shalom aleinu. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru. Amen. Aleinu ve'al kol
And now as we continue to pray, we pray for all those who are ill at this time, all those who need a refuah shlema, a complete healing of the mind, body, soul, and spirit, with the words of the Misha Berach prayer, found in the inside back cover of our Seder Ream.
May the source of strength
Bless the ones before us.
help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing for us and all of those we love. We sheberachim otenu mekor habracha avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema. The renewal
A body,
the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
And please be seated now as we continue with the Kaddish Shalem, page 54.
Shemei Rabbah, Amen. Ve'alma divrach irutei, ve'amlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon chayei l'chol Beit Yisrael, b'agalav v'zman kariv ve'imeru, Amen. Yehi Shemei Rabbah mevarach, le'al me'omaya, yitbarach, Barach Yishtabat Vit Pa'ar Vit Ramah Vit Naseh Vit Hadar Vit Halei Vit Halal Shemei Dechu Desha Brichu Le'ila Michol Berchata V'Shirata Tishchata V'Nechemata Ta'amiran Be'oma Ve'imeru Amen Titgabel Slot Hon Vot Hon D'Chol Yisrael Kodam Adahodi Vishmaya Ve'imeru Amen Yehi Shalom Rabba Min Shemaya Ve'chaim Alenu Ve'akol Yisrael Ve'imeru Amen Oseh Shalom B'imromav Uyaseh Shalom Alenu Ve'akol Yisrael Ve'imeru Amen.
Good Shabbos, everyone. Cousins and Ukrainian refugees, Lucia Orshoka and Alona Shugai, were among the millions who were running for their lives as Russian forces invaded their country of Ukraine. But in a wartime twist of fate, the cousins landed in Israel 2 weeks ago to a friendly face, someone who was repaying a decades-old kindness. The friendly face was a Jewish Israeli named Sharon Bass, whose Jewish grandmother was sheltered and saved by Lucia's non-Jewish grandmother in Ukraine during the Holocaust. Sharon said it was an honor to take in the cousins and return the immeasurable kindness from nearly 80 years ago. It was history repeating itself. But in this case, it's an inversion of the norm. We Jews have been persecuted throughout our entire history. We've been killed, kicked out, or forced to flee from almost every country we've stayed in long enough. But this time, in 2022, Jews have the privilege of being a safe haven for other fleeing non-Jewish refugees. Isn't that amazing? 74 years after its founding, Israel is considered a favorable destination for not only Jews fleeing Ukraine, but non-Jews as well. The Israeli Population Immigration Authority reported earlier this week that over 13,500 Ukrainian refugees have entered Israel since the outbreak of the war a month ago. How many of those 13,500 were Jewish? 3,500. 3,500 who are eligible for Israeli citizenship under the law of return. But the question remains in this difficult time where 10 million Ukrainians find themselves displaced, over 4 million have already left their country. Should Israel welcome in more non-Jewish refugees? The debate on the absorption of refugees from Ukraine contrasts two conflicting values that Israel has always struggled with. The first value, to sustain Israel as a Jewish state by absorbing mainly Jews as immigrants. Our people refuse entry worldwide, as the Nazis said about their genocide. Israel was created too late to save those millions of Jews. And today, thank God, Israel is there to ensure that the Jewish people are never again vulnerable and helpless. Isn't that the point of having a Jewish state? Jews come first. Perhaps you've heard of the Struma. On December 12, 1941, the Struma sailed from Romania with 769 Jewish refugees aboard. The vessel, commissioned by the new Zionist organization in the Irgun, was the last to leave Europe in wartime. The ship was actually an old cargo barge used to carry cattle and suited for no more than 150 passengers. The objective was to anchor in Turkey, and from there to wait certificates for pre-state Israel. The small, unseaworthy ship broke down several times, and a trip that should have taken 14 hours took 3 days. The Turkish authorities prevented the passengers from leaving the ship once they docked in Turkey for fear that the British would not give them certificates and Turkey would be forced to give these refugees refuge. There was an acute shortage of food and drinking water, despite help provided by the Jewish community of Istanbul. The passengers suffered from cold, filth, and hunger. And the ship remained in Istanbul for 70 days while the Jewish Agency and the Joint Distribution Committee tried to convince the British government to allow the ship to bring the refugees to pre-state Israel. The British refused to yield and pressured the Turks to return the ship to Romania to discourage further immigration from the Balkans. Despite the despairing appeals of the captain that the ship was unable to continue on its way, the Turkish authorities forcibly towed the Struma into the Black Sea. On the following day, a mighty explosion was heard and the ship went down. Later, it was determined the ship had been sunk by a torpedo from a Russian submarine. The only survivor of those 769 Jewish refugees fleeing for their lives was a young man named David Stoliar. A Coast Guard rowboat picked him up. Initially, he was taken to a military hospital in Istanbul, but to add insult to injury, the Turkish authorities put him in jail for being in Turkey illegally. After 71 days, the British government granted him an exception and allowed him to enter pre-state Israel. To me, this has always been one of the worst stories from the Holocaust, and there are many, as we know. Jews with nowhere to go because there was no Israel. Yes, there are two values that confront the Jewish state. One, to be a state first and foremost for the Jewish people, so there are never more strumas. But there's a second value, the desire to act in the world as a moral agent. Israel is there to uphold the moral core of our Jewish faith, the faith that has sustained us in exile for thousands of years. They require all of us as Jews to serve as a light unto the nations and to remember the Talmudic obligation, whoever saves a single life is considered to have saved the entire world. We know better than anyone what happens when the world shuts its doors. When there are refugees that need saving, perhaps Israel shouldn't even ask them who they are, rather, just what they need. You may remember the story from 1975 when Menachem Begin was the first Likud prime minister of Israel. And in April of 1975, North Vietnamese communists defeated the South Vietnam regime. Hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese secretly fled South Vietnam to escape communist persecution and torture. Many escaped in small, unreliable boats and faced harsh weather and threats from pirates as they were turned away by neighboring local authorities. More and more Vietnamese began escaping. On June 10, 1977, an Israeli cargo ship en route to Japan crossed paths with a boat full of 66 Vietnamese refugees. They were out of food and water, were extremely lost and scared, and their boat was leaking. Their SOS signals had gone ignored by passing East German, Norwegian, Japanese, and Panamanian boats. But the Israeli captain and crew immediately offered food and water and decided to bring the passengers on board and transported them to Israel. And once in Israel, Menachem Begin authorized the Vietnamese boat people with Israeli citizenship, comparing their situation to the plight of Jewish refugees seeking a haven during the Holocaust. Between 1977 and 1979, Israel welcomed over 300 Vietnamese refugees. Growing up as a child, when I was told this story, I was inspired to love my Jewish country even more. And yet some may say that welcoming in too many non-Jews will create a problem for Israel's Jewish demographics. Today in Israel, approximately 80% of Israel's 9 million citizens are Jewish. Israel has a legitimate need to maintain a resounding Jewish demographic majority, so that Israel never has to choose between being a democracy and being a Jewish state. Welcoming thousands of non-Jewish Ukrainians could alter Israel's demographics. But is it realistic to expect that many non-Jewish Ukrainians to permanently stay in Israel? It's not exactly an easy journey from Ukraine to Israel. And not many Ukrainians without Jewish ties are going to prioritize the Jewish state. And Ukrainian arrivals from the war zone without Jewish ties are unlikely to remain once the war is over. God willing, they'll be able to go home. In many cases, their fathers and their husbands remain there now fighting the Russians. Therefore, is it paranoia to believe that welcoming non-Jewish Ukrainians endangers Israel's Jewish demographic character? During a recent visit to a border crossing between Romania and Ukraine, Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid said, "We won't close our gates and our hearts to those who lost everything." He called for Israel to be even more generous about letting those in who are escaping the war. He added, it's Israel's obligation not only to be good Jews, but to be good people. And perhaps Israel's chief rabbi, David Lau, put it best when he said that Israel should welcome those refugees that don't find another country, at least until they can return to their homes. And then, with the sort of Jewish memory one has a right to expect, he said, so there won't be a situation in which a person flees the hostility and has nowhere to go, no safe haven. And he acknowledged that granting them residency or even citizenship is something else entirely. But first of all, he said, open the door. Open the door. Yes, there are two conflicting values the Jewish state continues to deal with. The desire to sustain Israel as a Jewish state, that is to absorb mainly Jews as immigrants. And the second, the desire to act in the world as a moral agent. How do you reconcile a conflict between these two all-important values? For now, compromise has been the answer, the accepted way. In Israel's case, this means working to rescue as many Jews as possible. Some estimations believe that up to 100,000 Ukrainian Jews may end up immigrating to Israel in the following months, and to take in non-Jews who choose Israel as a destination. Left-wing politicians in Israel are suspicious, with some justification, that right-wing leaders are not sensitive enough to the human rights of the non-Jewish Ukrainians. And right-wing politicians are suspicious, with some justification, that left-wing elected leaders are more excited about saving refugees than about saving Jewish refugees. But in reality, the policy gap between these two factions is not that wide. No one who is taken seriously wants Israel to implement a heartless policy of refusing refugees. And so far, no elected leaders want Israel to be the central absorber of faraway refugees. My friends, is that good enough for the Jewish state? This evening, we're honored to have some members here who wanted to spend a few moments telling us about a very worthwhile organization that they have that are directly helping Ukrainians, Jews and non-Jews. We're honored this evening to have Irene Bleiser. Irene, if you raise your hand, we're going to stand up. And Irene, you are here with your niece, Rena. And Rena, you immigrated from the Soviet Union as a Jewish refugee in 1978, settling here in Houston along with your parents, Michael and Natasha. Your family returned to their native Ukraine after its independence in 1991 to launch an investment business that has employed 30,000 people in Ukraine over the last 30 years. You also launched DAR, a charitable foundation, in 2002, and you mobilized that foundation to provide humanitarian aid to the people of Ukraine. Rena, you and your families are members of the Houston Congregation for Reform Judaism, where your son, Austin, became a bar mitzvah this past January. So I've asked Rena to spend just a moment with all of you this evening to tell you a little bit more about the life-saving work they're now doing to help those in the Ukraine. Please welcome Rena.
Shabbat Shalom. Mazel Tov to Sydney and the Ryder family. I'd like to thank them and Rabbi Strauss for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Rena Bleiser O'Malley, and I'm a Ukrainian American. The United States has been my home since I came to this country at the age of 4 as a Jewish refugee. But for the last 29 days, and really for the last 8 years, my heart has been with my family's homeland of Ukraine. On February 24th, as you all know, after 8 years of aggression, Russia invaded Ukraine outright with missiles launched at every major city in the country. Overnight, the lives of 44 million innocent people were changed. Imagine coming home from work, feeding your children dinner, putting them to bed, then waking up at 5 a.m. to explosions, air raid sirens, and announcements to head to your nearest bomb shelter. Millions have fled to neighboring countries, but most have stayed behind to fight and to protect their country. Our family has spent the last 29 days checking in daily, multiple times a day even, to make sure our loved ones are still alive. It's not just our past or a distant country we watch on TV. You see, other than just being immigrants from Ukraine, our family has spent the last 30 years running a large business there. And we have hundreds, actually thousands of people we love and care about directly in harm's way. While these past 29 days have been enormously stressful for our family here in Houston, it's nothing compared to what the brave people of Ukraine have been dealing with. As Russia continues to bomb and shell civilian areas, homes, schools, hospitals, destroying infrastructure that provides basic services like running water or power during what's still very much winter, the suffering that's occurring is beyond anything I could have imagined. I can tell you, without a doubt, it's worse than what you see on TV. It's worse than any of you could imagine. For the last 20 years, we've also operated a charitable foundation in Ukraine called DAR. DAR is the Ukrainian word for gift. Initially launched to help disadvantaged youth, DAR shifted gears in 2014 after Russia's occupation of Crimea and invasion of Donbass to provide assistance to the front lines. We've now mobilized our foundation to provide humanitarian aid on a much larger scale. Because of our history in the country and our network of contacts in every region of Ukraine, we're uniquely positioned to actually get aid into the hands of the people who need it most. While many organizations are providing support to the overwhelming number of refugees, our focus at DAR is to help those Ukrainians remaining in country currently in conflict zones. Quite simply, our goal is to help keep them alive. We're already actively shipping medical supplies, medicine, water treatment devices, MREs, and whatever else is being asked of us to provide for the basic needs of those Ukrainians enduring this nightmare. so that they may survive another day. Please continue to pray for the people of Ukraine and help them in any way you can. If you'd like to support our efforts, you can visit standwithukrainefund.org. You can ask me for any information you'd like at the end of the service. I'll stick around for a little while. And thank you so much again for your time and for your attention. Slava Ukraini.
Irene and Rena, thank you very much. And we've also posted information about your organization on our social media sites. And we wish you Godspeed in all the wonderful work, important work you're doing. And now let us return to our service as we rise, page 56, for the Aleinu. And now we invite all those in mourning and all those observing a yahrzeit to remain standing for the words of the mourner's Kaddish. And this week at Beth Yeshurun, we offer condolences to the families of Meyer Proler, Manya Gelman, Nelly Kazakevich, Joe Agar, and Linda Fleischler. Page 58. Yitzgadal v'yikadash shemei rabbah, v'yama divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dekol beit Yisrael, ba'agalav v'zman kari v'yimru amen. Yehi shmei rabbah mevorach leolam omei amaya. Yitzbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei dekudusha b'richu. Le'ela min kol berkata v'shirata, tishbekata v'nechemata, da'amiram v'yama v'yimru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shamaya, v'chayim aleinu v'yakol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'yakol Yisrael v'yimru amen. And you may be seated. So this evening we have two anniversaries and two very special golden anniversaries to celebrate. First, celebrating their 43rd wedding anniversary, Rochelle and Lee Wunsch. Mazel tov. And the most important event of this past year was the birth of your second grandchild. And both your grandchildren, 17 months apart, were born during the pandemic. They have a lot to talk about with their future classmates. You also enjoyed a very modest return to travel, and you're hoping the travel will pick up. And you made several attempts to return to shul every Shabbat morning, and now you're glad to be back on a more regular schedule in your usual seats. And we're happy to have you as well. And having you back shows us that this pandemic is waning, and it's a pleasure to have you here this evening. Rochelle and Lee, only more blessings and good health. We thank you all that you've done and continue to do for the community. And may God bless you with many more years of happiness and peace. Happy 43rd wedding anniversary. Mazel tov. Celebrating 63 years of marriage, Roxanne and Sam Gold. There they are, right there. Mazel tov. So Roxanne and Sam, you were married back in 1959 by Rabbi Malev, and you've lived in Houston your entire married life. You've raised two sons, Mark, married to Sydney, and Danny, married to Wendy, and both of whom were married by Rabbi Siegel. You have 7 grandchildren, wonderful grandchildren, 6 of which live in Houston. And one grandson recently married, and a second grandson will marry at the end of the year. So we know it will be a continued happy year for you, and may your grandchildren and all your family members continue to bring you only blessings and peace and happiness as you celebrate such a wonderful milestone in your life, 63 years of marriage. Mazel tov. Happy anniversary. And so I'd like to call upon 2 couples to the Bima that are celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary, Lenny and Susan Camberman, and Cheryl and Stephen Gollop. Come on up. So Cheryl and Stephen, I'll start with the 2 of you as you celebrate a half a century together as husband and wife. You were married back in Tulsa, Oklahoma, 50 years ago. You've been blessed with 3 children, Leonard, Jeffrey, and Jennifer, and their spouses, Hannah, Gerald, and Ray. 7 grandchildren, Orly, Olivia, Asher, Abby, August, Lev, and Ben. And I remember 15 years ago when we happened to run each other at a restaurant, and you were celebrating your 35th anniversary. You had a wedding veil on, Cheryl, and it was a fun experience, probably because you had a lot of wine, but it was also very special because it was spontaneous and unplanned. Everyone was just happy to be there. I happened to walk in, and I blessed the 2 of you as you celebrated 35 years together. And now 15 years later, your grandchildren continue to grow through B'nai Mitzvah and college and all good things that life has to offer. You have many, many blessings. I see some of your family members here this evening. It's wonderful to see them. You have such a wonderful and beautiful family. And may God continue to bless you with only more happiness and peace as you celebrate this wonderful milestone. And we look forward to celebrating with you for many years to come. Happy 50th wedding anniversary. Mazel tov. Come on up, guys. So Lenny and Susan, it's great to have the 2 of you here. Beth Yashur and Susan, it's been too long. It's been too long, and understandably, you hadn't had a chance to come the last couple of years, but what a wonderful sign it is that you're here this evening. It's a pleasure for all of us, for my colleagues and so many of us, to have you here, to see your wonderful beaming smile, and to have you here. And Lenny, we get to see you a lot, whether it's Daily Minyan. That's a good thing. It's at least 5 days a week. I was with you Tuesday morning during that rainstorm, and we had to pull someone out of the office to get a minyan.
Thank you for coming to make
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I'm glad I could be there to help make a minyan. And but Lenny, you led us beautifully through your davening, and that's what the 2 of you have done. As Cheryl and Stephen done, set a wonderful model for your children and grandchildren. You're blessed with 2 children and a grandchild, and your son Scott's getting married in June, so I'm so happy for Scott, knowing him very well, and he's found a beautiful bride. You have a lot to celebrate. A beautiful family, and I know how much this congregation and our Jewish tradition means to the 2 of you. And may you continue to model that for so many of us. May God bless you with health and peace, happiness and blessings. This evening you celebrate 50 years of marriage and many more years together as husband and wife. May God continue to bless you. Mazel tov. Happy anniversary. Absolutely. No, it's important to us. Thank you. Thank you. So a few announcements I wanted to share with you as we transition from Purim to Passover. And I have to say, I know some of you were there on Sunday. It was really a wonderful Purim carnival. It was our largest carnival we've had in many, many years, even pre-pandemic. It was just nice to see so many people wanting to get out and see people in the community again and be together. And as we now prepare for Passover, I want to let you know about a few things coming up. First, of course, we have our concert honoring the musical legacy of Cantor Finkelstein. It's this Thursday night. It's sold out. We have almost 1,000 people coming. And you'll be able to pick up your tickets at the administrative office this week or will call at the concert. And we look forward to sharing this event with you Thursday with Cantor Finkelstein, other wonderful cantors, including our new cantor, Cantor Rachel Goldman. Next Shabbat, next Friday night, we'll have our Tat Shabbat at 5 p.m., and at our Friday night service, we'll be welcoming our own Dr. Daniel Musher. Many of you may have seen online or read articles. This month celebrates the 100th anniversary of the first bat mitzvah, the very first one. And the first bat mitzvah in the entire history of the Jewish people was Dr. Musher's aunt. And the rabbi was his grandfather, the famous Mordechai Kaplan. So there's no better person to share a short presentation, a special perspective on this important milestone as we invite Dr. Musher to speak about the first bat mitzvah 100 years ago this month. Our incredible sisterhood is offering 2 programs coming up on Sunday, April 3rd, with a local nutritionist, Dina Stoller, Haroset and Healthy Eating for Passover. That is not easy. I may have to go to that. I don't know how you eat healthy during Passover, but I want to hear what she has to say. That's Sunday, April 3rd. And on April 6th, our sister will be joining the sisterhoods from Beth Israel and Emmanuel, along with the American Jewish Community, on hosting Women in Diplomacy, a special panel discussion with incredible female consul generals that are here in Houston now, from Mexico, Israel, Canada, Norway, and the U.S. Department of State Regional Director. And that'll be at Emmanuel. There's information on our website. Our kitchen is offering the Passover meals to go again this year. Go to our website. It's a wonderful menu. Begin your orders in soon. The deadline's coming up. And we are bringing back our family retreat at the end of April, April 29th and April 30th. It will be at Moody Gardens in Galveston. Some of our Beth Yeshurun clergy will be there. A lot of other treats, a lot of great programming. It's a program you don't want to miss. Go to our website for more information. That's April 29th and April 30th. And finally, I want to wish Mazel Tov to our bar mitzvah. Sydney, congratulations on beginning your bar mitzvah weekend. To your proud parents, Michelle and Eric, and other friends and family that are here or watching online. Congratulations, you did a beautiful job tonight. And we look forward to being back here in the Freeman Levitt Sanctuary tomorrow morning as you officially become a bar mitzvah, son of the commandments. And we know what a beautiful job you'll do. And now it's an opportunity to bless all of our sons and daughters that are here or watching online. We say to our sons, Yisimcha Elohim Ke'Ephraim Ke'Menashe. May God bless our sons like Ephraim and Menashe. And for all of our daughters, like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. And at the conclusion of our service, our kiddush will be outside in the sukkah courtyard. And all those 9th and 10th graders that are here, please meet Rabbi Fort in Stein Hall. We have over a dozen 9th and 10th graders are here to have a Shabbat dinner with Rabbi Fort, and that will be in Stein Hall following our service. And I'll add one more announcement. Some of you already know, you may have gotten the email. Unfortunately, we had to postpone our Poland-Germany trip. We had a lot of nice people coming. A lot of people signed up to go to Poland and Germany with my wife, Lisa, and me this summer. Due to the war in Ukraine, we'll have to postpone that trip again. We were all set to go in 2020, and then the coronavirus, and now it's war in Ukraine. So God willing, we'll go 2 years from now. But instead, Lisa and I will be going to Jerusalem this summer to study at the Hartman Institute, which is a world-class institution. Rabbi Morgan studied there before. I've always wanted to study there. It's an incredible program. It's a week-long program with the top minds in Israel, dealing with Zionism in this day and age, battling anti-Zionism throughout the world, how Israel will celebrate its 75th anniversary, dealing with the demographic issues that I spoke about in my sermon. It's a week-long program where we'll study, learn, travel together through the state of Israel. There's information on our website or email me, and I'd love to have you join us. That's June 22nd through 29th in Jerusalem, just a few months away from now. And so now with that, we're ready to bring our service to a close. We ask everyone to please rise as our bar mitzvah leads us in the Kiddush.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon hinhilanu zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit ki hu yom techila v'mikra el kodesh zecher letziat mitzrayim kivanu v'harta el tanu kidashta mikol hamim v'shabbat kodshecha me'ahava uvratzon hilchatanu baruch atah Adonai mekadesh hashabbat.
Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat.